Welcome to this edition of Agile and DevOps Tidbits. Today's subject is active inertia. So, as this active inertia presentation, we're going to look at why are so many established companies struggling with Agile and DevOps. To sort of answer this, we really need to look at who has been successful with Agile and DevOps. And if we're really take a very close look, the initial companies who were really successful with DevOps were more of startups. Many of them are very large now, but they had a mentality of a startup, and they were younger companies, and they have started adopting DevOps, and DevOps and Agile really what's allowed them to take off. And if we look at the Facebooks, the LinkedIn's, the Googles, the Zappos, on and on, it's this type of model of company. So if you're an established company who's trying to do Agile or DevOps, we sort of need to make sure you're patterning after the correct model. And for this, two companies that sort of come to mind are ING and Capital One. And for this particular presentation, I'm going to talk about, there's a tremendous read about ING's experience with Agile and DevOps, and you can find I've listed the McKinsey URL here, but it's a tremendous presentation from paper from the CIO and COO with McKinsey, discussing what they went through and what they learned and how to become successful with Agile and DevOps, and how they had to who they had to pattern their company after. So to start with active inertia, we need to understand active inertia is from Dr. Donald Soll of MIT. Dr. Soll is considered one of the global authorities on executing strategy in volatile markets, and he teaches courses on strategy formation and implementation at MIT. He's also been identified as a leading management thinker by The Economist, the Financial Times, and Fortune has even named him among the top 10 new management gurus to know. The Economist has listed his theory of active inertia among ideas that have shaped management over the past century. And Dr. Soll, prior to getting to academia, had worked for McKinsey and Company as a consultant, and he's also taught at Harvard and London School of Business. So this idea of active inertia, which we'll get into the next few slides, well, what is it? What is it? How's it affected? Just to give you an idea, some of the companies that have been hit by active inertia in the past, and many of them you'll be familiar with here, is Firestone Tire, IBM, Microsoft, Xerox, McDonald's, and Laura Ashley. So what is active inertia? We need to look at active inertia, and what we see is it's one of the most common business phenomena, and it's very perplexing. What we see is when the successful companies face big changes in their environment, they often fail to respond effectively. We find that they're unable to defend themselves against competitors armed with new products, technologies, or strategies, and they watch their sales and profits erode. They also see their best people leave and their stock valuations tumble. Some of them, which Laura Ashley would be one of them, they ultimately recover, some of them, but usually after a painful rounds of downsizing, restructuring, and many just simply don't recover from active inertia. So at the heart of active inertia is the observation, basically, that companies and management often get stuck in a rut. So when they see an entirely new situation arise, such as Agile or DevOps, they revert to old responses. And active inertia, basically in a nutshell, is management's tendency to respond to the most disruptive changes by accelerating activities that have succeeded in the past. The problem with this is that it's an inability to take action. It's not an inability to take, and someone make this great. These companies take action, but they're not taking the appropriate action. So getting into more of what is the four hallmarks of active inertia, we need to understand that when we look at the origins of these companies' success, most leading businesses owe their prosperity to a fresh competitive formula. So they had something new. They had a disruptive combination of strategies, processes, relationships, and values that sort of set them apart from the rest of their competitors. As that formula succeeded, and their customers multiplied, talented workers tended to flock to them, investors bid up their stock, and competitors respond with the most sincere form of flattery, imitation. unfortunately, all this positive feedback reinforces managers' confidence they have found one best way, and it emboldens them to focus their energies on refining and extending their winning system. So if we look at these 4 hallmarks of active inertia, they are, if we look at their strategic frames, and this is the set of assumptions that determines how managers view the business, but unfortunately it's become blinders. Then we look at processes, the traditional way things are done, and this is where it really affects Agile and DevOps. This is how we do things. Well, this Agile and DevOps will fit them into how our processes, how we do things. And unfortunately, this becomes routines. And then relationships, again, ties that sort of bind an organization together. This sort of becomes shackles, especially with employees. And then values, the shared belief that established the corporate culture. It becomes a dogma, and you really hear this in Gartner's projections of about 90% failures of DevOps companies who don't change their culture. This really ties into it. So what does all this active inertia, and how does it, this common mistake that Agile companies, and all too often you listen to companies or inside your company, when you hear these companies who are attempting Agile and DevOps, you'll hear remarks such as we're unique or we do things differently. And this is a problem of active inertia. And what you see is the simple fact that these successful established companies, they try to mold Agile and DevOps to how they do things instead of trying to mold to Agile and DevOps, which is the correct way. And what we're basically saying with active inertia is, before you even attempt to move to Agile and DevOps, you really need to make your entire company aware of the concept of active inertia so that you can, when you attempt Agile and DevOps, you're open to looking at new ways of doing things instead of being a rigid sort of playbook of this is how we do things, and somehow we're going to have to make Agile and DevOps fit into what we do. This is the wrong way. We need to be open, scan the Agile and DevOps opportunities and be able to change to them. Well, that'll wrap up this edition of Agile and DevOps Tidbits. As always, you can find more information on Agile testing framework or contacts at Torak. Thank you.